Hello and welcome back to the 42 Rugby Show. We're looking ahead to Ireland's 3-test series in South Africa. We're going to be chatting about Ireland's playing style and some of the criticisms of Joe Schmidt there. We'll also look at selection, and joining us today is former Ireland coach Eddie O'Sullivan. Eddie, thanks many for joining us. You obviously have quite a few experiences against the Springboks, some wins and maybe some tougher times down in South Africa in 2004. How was that tour? It's the last time Ireland obviously went down there. 2 defeats in 2 tests, but probably ran them quite close.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult tour, and I think that the fact there's 3 tests this time is a big challenge. But South Africa is very difficult to tour. It's quite an intimidating environment, and the physicality of the South African team traditionally against what is an Irish team at the end of the season always tells in the long run. My experience there was we had 2 tests we lost, one in Bloemfontein at altitude and one in Cape Town. But they were 2 good tests, and that we were in the games pretty much right through. I always felt that they were really the foundation for beating the Springboks the following autumn when they came to Dublin. And I knew leaving South Africa, if we learned from that experience, we could get them in the autumn, and it turned out to be that way. But getting a result in South Africa is a massive challenge. As I say, it's just that environment that makes it very hard to win there, and this time is no different this time around.
Is it very intimidating? Is that what makes it so difficult?
Certainly some venues are more intimidating than others. I remember the first test in Bloemfontein. It's quite an intimidating venue. The grounds, the crowds outside, they play a lot of, it sounds silly, a lot of rock music pounding in the background, and you have the big braais going on, and these big South Africans drinking beer and shouting abuse at you and pounding the bus as you arrive. It's all part of the environment. You have to deal with it, but you know, it's just one of those venues you go to and you go, geez, this is going to be tough before you even get off the bus. When you're kind of in another country on tour together, it's a strange environment because you know there's a bit of a them and us, and the local media probably give you a hard time as well, and it's just a different place, a different space. And if you can get a good energy in the group and things are going well, and you don't have to win, it's just people feel things are going well, it can be a very productive tour. You mightn't get a result on the tour, but you can put the foundations in for results down the track the following year. Having said that, if it goes south, then you start getting injuries or you're losing matches or things are going wrong, it can build up under pressure, and the touring is quite ugly at the end of the day. So that's traditional touring for every country. It's no different for Ireland. But South Africa is one of those places that get under your skin and put you in that place.
Yeah, is it difficult for a head coach to motivate players now because like they're dropping like flies? Johnny Sexton's out now. There's a few more injuries with the Carney brothers. Players are tired after a long World Cup season. Can it be difficult to motivate them?
No, for 2 things. One, it's not unusual to go on tour at the end of a season short of a number of players. It happens just the way the attritional nature of the game. You end up with guys injured at the end of the season. It's statistical probability. Having said that, I think as long as you have some good leadership on the tour, it's a great opportunity for guys coming in who were, you know, maybe a month ago thinking they were going to be on holidays now, you know, heading down to South Africa. Probably one of the best ones for me was that, like, Gavin Duffy came on the tour in 2004. He really wasn't going to feature 2 tests in 2 weeks. He was there, but it was part of the experience having him there. He played well for that season with Harlequins. And I think he was, you know, ready to come into the scene. But certainly in the second test, the morning of the second test, Jordan Murphy went down with a chest infection, and he'd come onto the bench. Funnily enough, he was downtown shopping with his dad. We spent about 2 hours trying to track him down. We got him eventually. He was sat on the bench, and Gervin Dempsey, who started, got a finger in his eye, and Gavin got his first cap in Newlands after 10 minutes, and he had a fantastic game. But you know, these are guys like this, like Kieran O'Halloran and Matt Healy, who weren't in the shake-up, and even Ian Madigan, who thought he might be, wasn't. Now suddenly, boom, they're down in South Africa, and it's all on. And you know, that's a great opportunity for them now, because they probably felt they played themselves into that position during the season, didn't work out for them. Now they can send a message to the coach, yeah, you should have had me in the first place, which is all good. That's positive for the squad.
Joe Schmidt's probably in a strange position though. Like, there's chances there for players, of course, and guys to make their name, but Joe's in a strange enough position that he's under a little bit of pressure. There's criticism growing against him, certainly based on the original squad selection and probably the playing style, because Connacht have been playing this brand of rugby that's so enjoyable to watch, and people are saying, why can't Ireland play like that? Is the criticism fair on Joe?
There are 2 different questions. Like, one question is about his selection, and some people felt that some of the Connacht players had played their way in. I'd always be reticent to criticise a coach for picking one player over another, because at the end of the day, the guy with the most information is the coach. He's closer to him than anybody else. We can all have our opinions looking over the fence. So I'd be reticent about, you know, saying he should have picked one guy over another. you really have to let the coach, cut his cloth on that front. If he thinks the guy's a better fit, then that's his prerogative. In terms of the way Ireland are playing, I think there is a couple of areas that have been up for discussion for a while now. Even to get away from the attack side of things, you go to the defence side of the football. We struggle in the World Cup. We were caught out wide against Argentina, badly caught. That was highlighted, before the game in certain quarters, and it happened to be the case against Argentina. You came out of the World Cup, we knew that had to be fixed. Les Kiss left and wasn't replaced, but the Six Nations, the same issues arose again in the Six Nations out wide. The issues are out wide when teams got us, particularly inside our 22, and could get the ball wide against us. There was big issues, and teams like England, got 2 tries in the space of 7 or 8 minutes, and Twickenham really killed the game, tore us apart. Even Scotland got 2 tries against us. Even Italy got 2 tries against us. All again coming out wide. Our spacing around the ruck, our numbers and our compressions left that space out wide, and we couldn't shut it down. And that's something that was there in the World Cup, was there in the Six Nations. So that sort of criticism is reasonable. Why aren't we not defending better than we have been, or why are we not taking a step? Now, Andy Farrell has come in. The very interesting will his stamp on the defence, how that will change. Will we get our balance better than it was? Will we shore up those outside channels? Will we change our line speed? Will we play up and in more? Because we haven't played up and in traditionally, except what Les Kiss liked to do was use bolters out of the line, make a good read, and Brian O'Driscoll was world class at making reads on his own and killing the football. But maybe we haven't that experience anymore on the line, but see what Farrell brings now, and that's probably a good talking point, is how we defend in South Africa. If we came out of South Africa and our defence had taken a bound forward, you would say that's been a good investment. But that's a question to be answered yet. Yeah. The attacking side of the football, I think we've played a very similar shape for a number of years under Joe Schmidt. It's been what we call the 3-ruck rotation. It's an attritional type of attack. Yeah. It's based on collision-based attack, winning a collision after collision, and basically eventually breaking the opposition down through pressure rugby. Yeah. And we've seen Leinster do that under Joe Schmidt, and we've seen Ireland do it under Joe Schmidt. What's probably happened is 2 things. One is against the bigger physical teams, and if you go back over the Six Nations where we did win, the teams that unhinged us were really England and Wales, who could match us physically. That attritional game didn't work that well. And I suppose also you have to take into account teams are beginning to make better reads on that, and getting defenders in front of Ireland more frequently and making it harder to break them down. We thought that might have emerged out of the World Cup and grown again, but it hasn't changed a lot. We did see some little wrinkles of maybe 1 or 2 passes before contact in the Six Nations, but no major change in the shape. Yeah. Going into South Africa now, that shape, as I said, is based on a collision, attritional type of rugby. Yeah. South Africa probably not the best place to bring that style of rugby. It's the one thing I've always felt about South Africa is you can play as hard as you want against them, but you're rarely going to beat them up physically. Yeah. And that's the question now, is if we stay in this shape and try and beat them up, or if we change away from that and try and move them around more and maybe box a little more clever around a bigger team.
On attack, I think Joe has been defending his side. He's saying they're making a lot of passes, 180 average per game in the Six Nations, but probably another stat that's relevant to that is the number of rucks. They're hitting 115 rucks on average per game, so that kind of signifies what you're actually doing with your tactics. On top of that, they had the most possession on average of any team in the Six Nations, so that kind of signifies what they're really doing in attack. The passes number isn't quite the whole story, is it?
No, and if you look at the way Ireland played, they've used under Joe Schmidt, as he did with Leinster very successfully, what they call a 3-ruck rotation, which is a very attritional way of playing the game. It's about winning collision after collision after collision and building pressure on the opposition, relentless pressure with the ball in hand, great accuracy at the ruck, great accuracy at the breakdown, good presentation. And building that pressure where eventually you get mismatches against the opposition, or they can't get off their line, and you get your hands free in an offload, or maybe you get an overlap. But it's about pressure based on physicality and attrition. And it's worked well. It worked very well for Leinster under Joe Schmidt. It's worked well for Ireland. You could say we won 2 championships. But the kind of teams that it doesn't work against, a team that can match you physically. And if you go back over the championships we did, when the teams that we couldn't get across the line on in that shape were Wales and England, who are able to match us physically. We thought maybe this Six Nations after the World Cup we would see that develop a little bit. It hasn't really developed that much. It's still the same shape, which kind of leads us into South Africa, which are a team that you know, are very hard to beat up physically. That's the one thing they bring to the game. No matter what their tactics are, physicality is their hallmark. And if we try and take them on physically and break them down through attrition rugby, it will be very difficult, I think. So it will be interesting to see if in South Africa now, if we start to change our shape a little bit and try to move the ball away more from the contact area and maybe box a little more clever rather than more physical with them.
Yeah, like that's really interesting because, again, Joe Schmidt defended maybe what Ireland are doing by saying it's actually hard to maybe bring in different style of players if they don't have that particular skill. Like, is that a fair defence for him? He's saying he doesn't have enough time maybe to do exactly what he wants to do with his team. Could Ireland play that shape, that Connacht shape?
I think you can, because I think it's after all a shape, it's a setup. Like you see soccer teams go out every week and they play different formations. They play 4-4-2, they play 4-5-1. I don't know. You know, I'm not a soccer guy, but you hear that talk, which is basically a shape. And when I was with Ireland, we played the same shape Connacht played against England a lot, because England gave you that space on the outside channels. They played a tight defence and they played soft on the corners. And Connacht this year did that really well, and they stuck to their guns. They played 3 channels, they kept numbers wide, they put a channel in the middle who could take it up or could pass out of it, and it caused lots of problems for defences. But it was just about a setup, you know. It's still about passing, it's still about carrying, it's about winning rucks, you know, cleaning out. Nothing like that changes, it's just a shape you play in. Ireland's shape, they play more of what we call the 3-ruck rotation. They hit, they come around the corner, they hit back again, and they load up players and they try to get wide off the 3rd ruck all the time. If that doesn't happen, they play on again. But it's about relentless pressure. It's not so much about space, it's more about building pressure through physicality, and that's why you've, you know, a lot of passes but a lot of rucks. You're not looking too far beyond one pass, maybe 2 passes on a collision. Where you see with Connacht, you're playing 4 or 5 passes sometimes to get to the next ruck.
Like how does that shape say stress the defence? Like in a very different way to what Ireland might do?
It's very simple. Like if you play the 3-channel attack, you've usually got 4 forwards in the middle of the field. You've got 4 people out wide, usually 2 backs, 2 forwards. There's your outside channel here again, 2 backs, 2 forwards, and these configurations can change on what they do. And then you've got your halfback, who's basically servicing the 3 channels, and you've got 2 playmakers, and they basically link the ball. So if the ball is in the middle here, that ball is passed to this player, who links it to that player. Now, if you defend that ruck, and you've got a lot of people here compressed at the ruck, like that.
Tight to the ruck.
Tight to the ruck.
As Leinster probably were against Connacht 2 times.
You can see that like 2 passes. 1 pass, 2 pass, you've got 4 people out in that space.
Yeah.
And that's where Leinster struggled against Connacht, and you could see like just 2 passes and suddenly the fullback's got to come up to close the gate, the space in behind. You saw like the score for Healy in the second half, and the first half in this corner against Leinster, the ball went dead. If that ball stayed in, I think Healy had another try, because the fullback had to come up and close the gate, and the sweeper here can't get across that quickly. He's got to worry about the middle. And they can also sometimes, if they hit the middle and you get your numbers wrong, let's say you put too many people on this side and they spot it, they can return. Even though they've come from this side, they can return again and get you.
Because they always have that option there.
They always have the option to come back, because these guys stay there. They don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
They live out here and they just look at the numbers. And that defence, the tight, soft defence, that kills it. Like England used it right in the noughties, and we just kill them all the time up those channels. You have a choice here. You can, when that ball is on this side of the field, this defence can come up and cut them off very aggressively.
So shut it down with line
shut them
speed.
down. Or the other option is that when that ball leaves that area, that these guys don't chase, they drop back, and you play more of a drop back defence. You keep a presence in the outside channels.
Okay, it's almost like rugby league where you're.
Yeah, there's an element of that, of looking up and dropping back and mirroring the attack. That's the way to defend that. But if you play close to the ruck and you say there's no way they're going to get through us, that's fine, but they will trouble you out in the corners. And you saw Connacht doing that to a lot of teams this year. Yeah. Having said that, you know, Ireland struggled with that a little bit as well in the Six Nations. You saw basically England, you saw even Scotland and Italy getting tries against Ireland out wide, because we had our compression around the ruck. They weren't going to go through us, but they certainly got around us. Yeah. And that's something you think that Farrell will address. That has to be looked at.
Just last one on that shape. So, like you mentioned, you use it against England. Like how long did it take to implement that? Joe's saying he doesn't have the time to maybe change things, but...
Well, I remember we put it in, actually the first time we put it in against England was the 0-3 game in Lansdowne Road, where they beat us for the Grand Slam. And we probably were on the cusp of getting it right around that time. There was 0-3, but by the time we played them again in 0-4, we had it locked and loaded. and 04, 05, 06, 07. We got them all the time with it. We lost in a way in Twickenham because we had a lot of injuries. Our midfield was very fractured that day, but as long as they gave us that space, we were in a position to load up and take it.
Yeah.
And that's what attack is about, is looking at what the defence gives you and then building your shape to take advantage of what you're given.
Okay.
And you have to change all of that. At the international level, if you play the same defensive shape all the time, teams will get you by using a different attacking shape. If you use the same attacking shape all the time, teams will shut you down because they can anticipate your attack, and their defensive shape will mirror it. And that's what tactics is all about. But you know, I think, and I said this last week publicly at a function, that Connacht will find it more difficult next season. Why? Teams will adapt. They will say, well, Connacht did this last year, they try and do it again, we're going to take it away. And that'll be interesting. I talked to John Muldoon, he said, they know that they're going to have to change things up next year. They can't do exactly the same thing. That's what it's about.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Really interesting to see what Ireland throw out in terms of shape against South Africa. I guess a really important aspect of that is who's actually in that shape for Ireland, who's in the team. Again, Joe's probably been criticised for being a conservative selector. Is that fair at times, do you think?
No, I don't think it's fair, to be honest. I think it's very easy, like, to play Monday morning quarterback with selections, or, you know, say you should have picked this, you should have picked that. And I keep saying this, and maybe people disagree with it, but the reality of being an international coach is you have like 10 or 11 games a year, and you've got to win them all. It's just that simple. Like all of those games, maybe one game a year, maybe against a tier 2 nation in the autumn where you have a little bit of wriggle room, where you can change things around. But by and large, in 6 nations or touring the Southern Hemisphere, it's full metal jacket. And much as you'd like to tinker with things, you don't get the opportunity. And the truth of the matter is, at international level for Ireland, given the number of your players, the depth of your squad, the reality is that most of the time your transitions are forced upon you by injuries.
Yeah.
You know, so to say that, oh, well, you know, we're going to jimmy the team around in the 6 Nations and see what happens, well, that's never a good plan. And if you saw the 6 Nations, you know, the guys that came through were based on injuries. Like the classic one, like probably the guy who jumped off the page in the 6 Nations was Ultan Dillane. Ultan Dillane had a phenomenal season with Connacht, and you have to give Joe Schmidt credit for picking Dillane. He said, there's the guy I want. He came through, he delivered. Excellent decision. But Dillane probably wouldn't have seen the light of day if Mike McCarthy hadn't got concussed. And that's the reality of international rugby. And at the same now, you've got, you know, Matt Healy, people are jumping up and down, Tiernan Allern, all good cases, but the coach has got to say, look, this is the guys I'm going to go to war with in South Africa. Now there's been injuries, now they're in. Now it's their opportunity. Like the rubber hits the road now next week and at the end of the weekend, and they've got to deliver if they're asked to. And they may not see game time because, you know, there were other guys ahead of them even, the coach is thinking. So I'd never jump all over a coach regarding selections. Now, if you say, oh, we're going to make all these progressions and we're going to blood new players, regardless, then you got to do it. But in reality, when you're in there, you find out that really it's only injuries that put you in that position where you have to play your hand. It's not a bad thing, but that's the way it plays out, I think, for most international coaches.
Yeah. If you were to look at a possible predicted starting 15 for Joe, it's going to be along very much predictable lines. There's not going to be big surprises.
So. I mean, the pack is not rocket science. I think, you know, it's going to be, the front row is going to be basically McGrath, it's going to be Best, and it's going to be Ross. I think the second row, Toner, is a shoe-in. I think he'll go for Donegal Ryan there. He's a very abrasive player. He's very experienced. And then the back row is going to be certainly Heaslip, going to be CJ Stander, and probably Henderson in the back row. No
natural open side, is that term overused? Is that relevant?
South Africa, like there's nobody going to be under 6'4" or 5 in the South Africa back row, or probably the team. So, and you're going to need a presence in the line-out. You know, if you bring 3.5 line-out jumpers, say he's got Henderson as a jumper, he's got Donegal Ryan, and he's got obviously Devin Toner, and he has 2 other options like a Jamie Heaslip or a CJ Stander he can go to in a pinch. That gives him like 3 plus 2.5 jumpers, which takes pressure off your 3 main jumpers, gives you more options in the line-out.
So Conor Murray probably picks himself at 9, but what about the rest of the backline? There's a selection dilemma maybe with that fullback slot on with Rob Kearney's injury. He needs to pick someone maybe out of position there, does he?
Yeah, I think there is. I think the 10 slot is obviously Paddy Jackson is the guy who's in line, although Madigan probably a little more comfortable in the Joe Schmidt system, having played with Leinster and played with Ireland more. But I think he'll go with Jackson based on the fact he was first guy on the plane. So the midfield is very interesting because, you know, the original selection, you have Rob Kearney, a full back. That's one full back. The other two full backs are on the centre. You know, that's basically Jarrod Payne, who's played a good bit of full back this year, and Robbie Henshaw. Now, which guy do you put back there? I mean, I can't see him going with Tiernan O'Halloran off the bat. You know, a new cap in the first game, so he's got to adjust his midfield. My gut on it is that the trade-offs he'll have to make is that Jarrod Payne is probably the most comfortable full back between himself and Henshaw at the moment. Played there more. Not that Robbie couldn't play there, but I don't think he's in the same space as Jarrod Payne is. But if he puts Payne back to full back, it changes his defensive dynamic, because Payne is exceptionally smart at playing that outside channel on defence, the 13 channel, hardest place in the field to defend. So I think he won't put Payne back to full back. He'll put Henshaw back to full back, and then he'd probably go with Luke Marshall in the centre, and you'll have an all-Ulster midfield playing together.
Yeah, that's a nice combination.
Makes sense, yeah, they know each other. And then let Henshaw trade as well at full back, even though probably, as I said, Payne probably more natural there at the moment. But I think Henshaw is well able for it. So I think that's where it'll break. And then the wings, I think, you know, Andrew Trimble and Keith Earls, no rocket science there.
Yeah. Would you be tempted to go for maybe a Matt Healy, a pure finisher, or is it maybe just too much of a risk? Is there risk involved in throwing him in?
Well,
there?
to be fair, like, if you were going to drop Andrew Trimble, or you're going to drop, which people don't think of, you're going to drop Andrew Trimble or Keith Earls, and you sit him down and say, we're going to pick this guy's a better finisher than you. Where does that stack up? I mean, like, Trimble is a phenomenal finisher, and Earls is a great finisher. So, like, I think it's a very tough discussion for either of those guys, and their experience as well. Like, look, Matt Healy's had a phenomenal season. He's on the plane. He may well get a shot at this, but I think, you know, the two guys that are going to go in on the season campaigners, for good reason, I think it'd be a smart selection. You know, taking a punt on Matt Healy in the first test is an unnecessary risk, I think, when you've got guys like Trimble and Earls available. You know, Ireland haven't won in South Africa, I think, for a long time.
Ever,
yeah.
On South African soil.
On South African soil. So, like, that pressure will build and build on South Africa. So Ireland just put us in a position to stay in the game, where with 10 minutes to go, it could go either way. That's all you can do. And if you can do that, then maybe you nick a test.
Yeah.
And the pressure on the South Africans builds and builds, and maybe they crack. It's a new team. Their leadership structure is not in place. The coach doesn't know everybody. You know, this is probably the best time to get them if you're going to get them. But a lot of things have to fall into place to create that environment.
Opportunity knocks for Ireland. Eddie, thanks a million for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for watching. Loads of fun ahead with Ireland on their 3-test series against South Africa. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and tune in next week.